All right, hopefully you took a look at the degrees example of phase shift and horizontal shift. I'm going to try and give you a radian example here, and we'll use cosine this time. So y equals 2 cosine 4x minus pi. And I won't throw a vertical shift in this one. I will continue to list my amplitude, the period, a quarter of the period, my phase shift. Let's go with phase shift, which remember is the horizontal shift. And then my critical values, my horizontal coordinates that are of interest to me. I'll list all those out. So we'll say the amplitude is 2 in this problem. That's my A term. Because the x is not by itself, and I'll typically use x when I'm in radians. The previous example, I used theta because it was in degrees, but it's in radians. I'll use x. We gotta do some factoring here and say that y equals 2 cosine. If I factor out that 4, I'm left with x pi over 4 as the argument of cosine. My b term is 4. So while a is 2, b is equal to 4. So my period is 2 pi over 4. 2 pi over b. In the previous problem is 360 over b, but because we're in radians, it's 2 pi. So let's simplify that. It's pi over 2. A quarter of the period is pi over 8, and that'll help me space out all these critical values horizontally. My phase shift, now that I've done the factoring, is pi over 4, and that's to the right, or positive pi over 4 is my phase shift. So if that's my first term, pi over 4 is my first critical value, I'm then going to go pi over 8 units each time. And since my quarter period is in eighths here, I'm actually going to turn this first term into eighths. It's just going to make listing them out a bit easier. So my starting point, which is pi over 4, is also 2 pi over 8, would make the next critical value 3 pi over 8, 4 pi over 8, 5 pi over 8, and 6 pi over 8. And we can take care of simplifying those later. But I've got all those pieces now. And let's see, we've got y and x here. No vertical shift, so we're going to go up to 2, down to negative 2. And we're starting at pi over 4. So pi over 4, and we're ending at 3 pi over 4. That's this guy here. 3 pi over 4. And just to double check, make sure from beginning to end, hopefully we're recognizing that that is pi over 2, which is our period. So all the numbers seem to be working out. I did the addition correctly. We have a positive cosine curve, so in your mind's eye, you're hopefully thinking that looks like kind of like a vase. We'll start at the top there, then we make it to the horizontal axis at our first quadrant of rotation. Then we bottom out, back to the horizontal axis, and then back up top. And we'll connect the dots. And that looks like a positive cosine curve to me. And we've got all our pieces in order. This right here, this point here, is 4 pi over 8, or pi over 2. And this guy was 3 pi over 8 and 5 pi over 8. So now you've got an example in radians graphing cosine. with your sine in degrees on our other video.